I spotted him before he spotted me. Chase. Same crisp suit. Same arrogant stride. Same smug smirk that used to make me feel small. He walked into the farm table like he owned the place, hand in hand with a woman who looked like she hadn't eaten anything fried in a decade. Brittany. Of course. Her perfume arrived before she did. They didn't see me right away. I was standing near the host stand, double-checking tomorrow's reservation list. I could feel their laughter from across the room, the same kind that once echoed through my head long after they'd walked away. I braced myself, wondering if they'd recognize me, if Chase would try to belittle me the way he used to. But then something unexpected happened. The host approached and said, loud and clear, "Your table is ready, Miss Dawson." And just like that, Chase's smirk faded. I didn't grow up in a city with fine restaurants or rooftop bars. I grew up in a 2-bedroom farmhouse outside Salina, Kansas. My mom worked the night shift at the nursing home, and my dad repaired tractors. We didn't have much, but what we did have was love and my mother's cooking. That tiny kitchen, with its squeaky floorboards and chipped tile counters, was where I learned to dream. While other kids played video games or watched cartoons, I watched my mom make pot roast, hush puppies, fried catfish, and peach cobbler that could make a grown man cry. I'd stand beside her, barefoot and wide-eyed, memorizing every movement, every sprinkle of seasoning, every quiet hum she made when something turned out just right. I always said one day I'd open my own place, a spot where food felt like a hug and smelled like home. But dreams don't pay rent. At 19, I packed my life into a weathered blue suitcase and caught a Greyhound to Austin. It was the only city I'd ever been to that felt alive, like something was always about to happen. It scared me and thrilled me at the same time. Rachel picked me up at the station. We'd known each other since 4th grade, and though we weren't always close, she was the only person I knew in Texas. She let me crash on her couch in her tiny apartment off South Lamar. The floors creaked and the air conditioning rattled like it had asthma, but it was shelter. And for now, that was enough. I applied everywhere. Diners, grocery stores, food trucks. No one wanted to hire someone with no real experience. Finally, I landed a job at a small cafe just off the Metro rail line. It wasn't glamorous. We served burnt coffee, microwave biscuits, and called it breakfast. The tips were terrible, the manager yelled too much, and by the end of my 12-hour shifts, my feet throbbed so bad I could feel my heartbeat in my toes. But every night I came home, opened my cheap secondhand laptop, and watched YouTube videos about knife skills, plating techniques, and regional cuisines. I'd write down recipes in a beat-up composition notebook I carried everywhere. I'd practice them when Rachel was working late, using whatever I could afford from the discount aisle at H-E-B. One night, I made chicken and dumplings for Rachel. She took one bite, looked at me, and said, "Maggie, you're wasting your life slinging hash for someone else." I smiled, but I didn't say anything. I didn't have the luxury of quitting. Rent was due. Groceries weren't free. And culinary school? That was a fantasy I couldn't afford. Still, in the quiet moments, those rare times when the world slowed down just enough for me to think, I'd close my eyes and picture it. My own place. Wooden tables, fresh herbs on the windowsill, the smell of biscuits in the oven, and smoked brisket simmering on the stove. I didn't want something fancy. I wanted something real. But Austin was cold to dreamers. And then he walked in. It was just another Monday morning. I was wiping down tables, wishing I had better shoes, when the bell above the cafe door jingled. He stood out instantly. Tailored jacket, polished boots, watch that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He looked out of place, the kind of man who belonged in glass offices, not roadside cafes. He glanced around like he was amused. When I approached to take his order, he looked up with these icy gray eyes and gave me this slow, deliberate smile. "You serve good coffee here?" he asked. "We try," I said, "but our tea's better." "Then I'll have tea, and whatever dessert you recommend." His voice was deep, smooth, like a man who'd never been told no. I hesitated just for a second, then smiled back. "Try the banana pudding." It's not fancy, but it's honest. He nodded. Honest sounds perfect. That was the first time I met Chase Walker. He came back the next day, then again, and again, always sitting in the same booth, always ordering tea, always leaving tips that were too generous. At first, I thought he was just another flirt, but something about him was different. He asked questions about my life, my dreams. He actually listened. One evening, he waited for me outside the cafe, said he had something for me. I laughed nervously, but followed him to his car, where he handed me a small box. Inside was a silver bracelet with a heart-shaped charm. Chase, I can't accept this. It's just a token, he said. You deserve more than this place. I should have known better, but back then, I wanted so badly to believe him. 2 months later, I was standing on the rooftop of a swanky downtown hotel, with string lights twinkling overhead and the scent of champagne in the air, when Chase dropped to one knee. I froze. We had only known each other for 8 weeks. He said time didn't matter, that when you knew, you knew, that some people waste years pretending. But he didn't want to pretend with me. I was the real deal, and he didn't want to waste another minute. My breath caught in my throat. No one had ever looked at me that way before, like I was something rare. Rachel was furious when I told her. Are you out of your damn mind, Maggie? She barked, pacing our tiny living room. 2 months? You barely know this guy. You don't even know where he lives. What does he actually do? He's in real estate investments, I said softly. Oh yeah? Ever see an office? A business card? I didn't answer. My parents were more measured, but I could hear the worry in their voices when I called home. Honey, my mom said gently, love's a beautiful thing. But love without time is just lightning, bright and fast, and sometimes it burns. But I didn't want to listen. I didn't want their doubt clouding the one good thing that had happened to me since I'd left Kansas. Chase made me feel chosen, elevated, like I belonged somewhere better than the bottom of a kitchen hierarchy. So I said yes. The wedding was simple, a courthouse ceremony. Dinner at a fancy restaurant with white tablecloths and overpriced appetizers. Chase said he didn't believe in big, flashy events. I took it as humility. I thought it meant he was grounded. That night, he handed me the keys to a penthouse apartment overlooking the city skyline. This is home now, he said, wrapping an arm around my waist. You're home. I stepped inside and almost cried. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, a closet bigger than my entire bedroom back in Kansas. It felt like a dream. It was for a little while, but dreams don't last. Within weeks, things started to shift. Subtle at first. Chase began coming home later. He stopped asking about my day. Conversations turned into one-word responses. Any attempt to talk about how I was feeling ended in, not now, or can we not do this? I kept telling myself he was just adjusting to married life. Maybe work was stressful. Maybe I was overthinking. Then one day I tried to buy groceries and my debit card declined. I called Chase. Oh, right, he said casually. I had your card deactivated. I'll get you a new one that connects to my account. It's easier that way. Easier for who? I asked. For us, he said. You're my wife. You shouldn't have to worry about money. I didn't know what to say. Something about it didn't feel right, but I didn't argue. That was the first boundary he erased. The second came wrapped in red lipstick and smug entitlement. This is Brittany, he said one afternoon. She's my cousin. Needs a place to crash while she finds her own. Brittany swept into the apartment like she owned it. Within days, she'd filled the guest bathroom with expensive cosmetics, draped her clothes over the living room chairs, and started ordering around the cleaning lady like she was staff in a hotel. She'd look at me like I was a pet Chase had rescued. You're lucky, you know, she said one morning, sipping green juice in a robe that wasn't hers. Chase always knew how to pick what works for him. That sentence haunted me, but I still wanted to believe things would go back to how they were. Then came the investment opportunity. We were having dinner, some fusion place he liked, and out of nowhere he said, "I'm thinking of expanding into boutique hotels. Great margins. I have a solid plan, but I need a credit line." I nodded slowly. "So, well, I thought we'd open a loan under your name. You've got a better credit score, and it's just easier that way. I'll handle all the payments, of course. It's for both of us." I blinked. "You want the loan in my name?" He smiled. "It's just paperwork, Maggie. You trust me, right?" Something cold settled in my chest. "I'll think about it," I said. He didn't like that answer. He just stared for a second, then shrugged like it didn't matter. But there was something behind his eyes, like he was already planning his next move. That night, he barely spoke to me. The next morning, he was gone. For the first time, I started to wonder who I'd really married. The silence in our apartment the next morning felt different. It wasn't peaceful. It was too quiet, like the calm before something broke. Chase hadn't come home the night before. Brittany was gone too. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, cradling a lukewarm cup of tea, staring out over the city like it might give me an answer. That's when I heard the front door open. I froze, expecting to see Chase walk in. But instead, I heard his voice from the hallway, low and casual, and then laughter. He was on the phone. He didn't know I was home. I took a quiet step back, flattening myself against the kitchen wall, holding my breath. Yeah, she's still clueless," he was saying. "I think I've got her where I want her. Banks already pre-approved the loan. Just gotta get her to sign the papers." My fingers curled so tightly around my mug, I thought it might shatter. Then came the words that would gut me for years. "You should see how she looks at me. Like a damn puppy. It's pathetic." Silence. Laughter. He continued, almost bored. "Once she signs, we bounce. Spain's calling. Let her deal with the mess." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even move. Maybe he came back to grab something. Or maybe he thought I was already gone. Either way, he never imagined I'd be standing just on the other side of the wall, listening. My heart wasn't breaking, it was collapsing. This wasn't just about betrayal. It wasn't just about the loan. It was about how little I meant. How disposable I was to the man I thought had saved me. And how blind I'd been to the signs. He called me pathetic. A damn puppy. Something inside me snapped. I walked to the bedroom, trying not to let the floorboards creak. I yanked my suitcase from under the bed, tossed it on top, and started throwing clothes in, no folding, no packing, just grabbing. Jeans, shirts, my toothbrush, my birth certificate, the little stash of cash I'd hidden inside a sock drawer. I couldn't risk taking a second longer than I had to. I could still hear his voice through the hallway. 2 more days, max, and we're done. I zipped the suitcase and tiptoed to the front door. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped the keys. "Just go, Maggie, just walk. Don't stop. Don't think." I opened the door and slipped out into the hallway, heart pounding in my throat. I didn't even wait for the elevator. I took the stairs, 3 floors down, practically running. When I stepped out into the street, the wind hit my face like a slap, and for the first time in months, I could finally breathe, but I didn't know where to go. I didn't have friends in the city outside of Rachel, and I hadn't talked to her in weeks, not since I accused her of being jealous, of not supporting my happiness. Still, she was the only person who'd ever told me the truth. So I dragged my suitcase 4 blocks to the bus stop, climbed on with a crumpled $5 bill, and rode across town in silence. It was dark when I reached her building. I stood outside her door for what felt like forever. My hand hovered over the doorbell. The city bustled around me. Cars honking, dogs barking, laughter from a nearby bar. And still I couldn't bring myself to press it. What if she turned me away? What if I deserved it? But then, I pressed it. The door opened almost immediately. Rachel stood there in an oversized t-shirt, a mug of tea in one hand. She looked at me, at the suitcase, at my red-rimmed eyes, and said nothing. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Just a whisper. He didn't kick me out. I left. Something shifted in her face. She set her mug down on the entryway table, crossed her arms, and said, "And now, What? I swallowed. Can I stay here? Just for a little while. Until I figure it out. She didn't move. She just looked at me, the way only someone who's loved you and been hurt by you can look. Finally, she said, "You told me I was jealous, that I didn't want you to be happy. I know. No, you don't. I warned you because I care, and you threw that in my face." Tears blurred my vision. I was wrong. I know that now. Rachel stared at me for a moment longer, then sighed, stepped aside, and said, "Put the bag down. Couch is yours." Relief flooded me so fast, I nearly collapsed. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," she muttered. "Thank whatever's left of my patience." That night, I lay on her couch with a blanket that didn't quite cover my feet, staring at the ceiling fan spinning overhead. I had nothing. No husband. No money. No plan. But I wasn't trapped anymore. And that was a start. A few days later, I started signing my name again, Maggie Dawson, not Walker. I had never legally changed it, but after the wedding, I stopped using it. Back then, I thought taking his name made me part of something bigger. Now, I realized I'd been erasing myself one letter at a time. Dawson was mine, and I wasn't hiding it anymore. The next morning, I woke up before the sun even rose. Rachel was already in the kitchen, pouring coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. She handed me one without saying a word. It was her way of showing grace without rubbing it in. I sipped in silence, letting the bitterness of cheap coffee and the weight of everything I'd lost settle in my chest. I couldn't afford to sulk. I'd spent enough time waiting for life to change. Now it was up to me. After Rachel left for work, I opened my laptop, still cracked at the corner from the move to Austin, and started scrolling through job listings. Most of them required experience I didn't have, or credentials I couldn't afford. Culinary school had never been an option. Chase had promised I wouldn't need it. Now that promise felt like another lie folded into 100 others. I sent out a few applications anyway, mostly hostess jobs, line cook assistant, dishwashing, anything that meant a paycheck. But rejection came fast and cold. Not enough experience. Position already filled. We'll keep your resume on file. By noon, I felt the ache of failure creeping back in. That's when Rachel peeked into the apartment during her lunch break. "You still on that laptop?" she asked. I nodded. "You need to get back into a restaurant. Any restaurant. Go apply in person. Smile. Show up like you mean it. They hire fast when people quit." "I don't want to be a waitress forever." She leaned against the doorframe and crossed her arms. "Then don't be. But first survive. Eat. Pay rent. You can chase your dream once you've got your feet under you." She wasn't wrong. So that afternoon, I pulled my hair into a ponytail, slipped on a clean shirt, and hit the pavement. The first 2 places turned me away before I even finished saying hello. The third, a little Russian Southern fusion spot tucked in the corner of East Austin, was different. The manager was a woman with sharp eyes and a tired voice. She read my application, looked me over, and said, "You start tomorrow." I almost cried. It wasn't glamorous. The shifts were long, the kitchen louder than a drumline, and the head chef, a man named Hank McAllister, was as grumpy as he was brilliant. He barked orders like a drill sergeant and scowled at anything that didn't meet his standard. I did my best to stay out of his way. I ran orders, cleaned tables, carried trays that nearly broke my wrists. But I watched, closely, every sauce, every garnish. Every pan flipped in rhythm, like a song only they knew how to sing. One night, near closing, I lingered by the kitchen window too long. Hank looked up and barked, "What are you staring at?" "Sorry," I said, backing away. "Just watching. This ain't a theater. You want to look, get to work." I started to leave, but then I turned back. "Your béarnaise, it's breaking." He squinted at me. "It's too hot," I said quietly. "If you pull it off the flame and whisk in some cool butter, it might come back together." For a moment, I thought he might throw a spoon at me. Instead, he did exactly what I said. The sauce held. He didn't thank me. He didn't even look at me. Just muttered, "Keep working." The next day, he cornered me by the service counter. "Where'd you learn that?" "Internet." "No culinary school?" "Nope." "Humph," he scratched his chin. "You want to learn for real?" I stared at him. "Yes." "Then stay after shift. No pay. Just listen and do what I say." My heart leapt. Deal. That's how it started. Night after night, I stayed behind while the rest of the staff went home. I chopped vegetables, peeled garlic, stirred stalks, cleaned fish until my hands reeked for days. Hank didn't praise. He didn't coddle. But he taught, slowly, methodically, like passing on a sacred language. And I soaked up every word. For the first time in months, I felt anchored. I wasn't a wife. I wasn't a fool. I wasn't broken. I was a cook. And I was starting to remember who I used to be, before Chase, before the lies, before the loneliness. I still had my dream. It was dusty, bruised, and buried, but it was still there. And now, for the first time in a long time, it felt like I might actually reach it. It was a Thursday evening, a little after 7, and the dinner rush had just begun. Orders were flying in, plates clattering, steam rising from the open kitchen in chaotic harmony. I was moving fast, one hand balancing a tray of sweet tea and cornbread, the other scribbling notes for the next table, when the manager leaned over and nodded toward the far booth. "Guy in the corner," she said. "That's Mitchell Grant." I blinked. Should I know who that is? She raised an eyebrow. "He owns the Fieldhouse Group. Farm-to-table spots all over Texas. He drops in sometimes low profile. People say he's always looking for the next thing." I nodded slowly and turned toward the booth. The man sitting there looked like he belonged in a Patagonia catalog. Salt and pepper hair, dark jeans, button-up rolled at the sleeves, and a face that said he'd seen the world and didn't need to prove it to anyone. When I approached his table, he smiled politely and closed the menu. "What's really worth ordering tonight?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. The braised short ribs with collard greens. We finished them in a sorghum glaze. It's sweet but smoky. My favorite dish here. You sound like someone who knows their way around a kitchen. I smiled just a little. Not officially. I'm learning. He tilted his head. "Learning from Hank." "Yeah, every night after shift." He chuckled. "Then you're either stubborn, brave, or stupid. Maybe all three." He ordered the short ribs and a glass of sweet tea. When I brought the food, I caught him studying the plating the way Hank did when he was about to rip someone apart. He took a bite, chewed slowly, then nodded once. When I turned to leave, he stopped me. "What would you change about this dish?" I froze. No one asks servers that kind of question, especially not big-time restaurant owners. I looked down at the plate. The glaze is good, but I'd finish it with a splash of apple cider vinegar. Cut through the richness, give it some lift. His brow lifted. "Interesting." Then he set his fork down. "I have a concept I've been thinking about for a while. Something small, intimate, no gimmicks, just real food made with care. Problem is, I need someone who actually cares. Someone hungry." I stared at him. "You think that's me?" "You're the first person I've seen around here who looks at food like it matters." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to laugh it off. Assume he was joking. Assume this was just a weird conversation with a nice customer who tips well. But another part of me, the part that hadn't dared hope in a long time, whispered, "This is your moment." "I don't have a degree," I said quietly. "No formal training. Just my hands and what Hank's been showing me. That's more than most." He didn't say anything else that night, just left a generous tip and walked out. But then he came back. Once. Twice. By the end of the week, he'd been there 4 times, always ordering something new, always watching, quietly. It wasn't until the 5th visit that he finally slid that card across the table. He slid a business card across the table. If you're serious, call me. Let's talk. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at that card like it might vanish if I blinked. Rachel came home around midnight to find me sitting at the kitchen table, still in my apron, hands shaking. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. "I think someone just offered me a shot at opening a restaurant." Her eyes widened. I told her everything about Mitchell, the dish, the idea, the card. She sat across from me, silent for a while. Then, in typical Rachel fashion, she said, "You're not doing this alone." I looked up. "What?" "You heard me. You can cook and God knows you've got heart. But I've worked admin for 6 years. I can do the paperwork, permits, the boring stuff. You be the heart. I'll be the spine." My throat tightened. "Rachel, I don't even know what to say." She reached for my hand. "Say yes." So I did. The next morning, I called Mitchell. By noon, we were sitting in a quiet coffee shop in East Austin, notebooks open, sketching out what this dream could look like. No frills, no pretense, just a warm, lived-in space that smelled like fresh bread and sounded like laughter. Mitchell promised to help with initial investment and logistics, but he made one thing clear. "This has to be yours. Your food. Your heart. I'm just giving it a place to land." I nodded slowly, almost afraid to believe it was real. But it was. And just like that, my second life began. We called it the farm table. It felt right, simple, honest, warm. A place where food didn't need translation or trendiness. Just roots. We wanted it to feel like a kitchen you grew up in. Only better. Mitchell helped us scout locations. But nothing felt quite right. One space was too small, another too modern, another way over budget. Then we found it, a squat little brick building on a quiet street in East Austin, with big front windows and peeling blue paint. It had been a bookstore in the 90s, then a thrift shop, then nothing. But the bones were good. The ceilings were high, the light was soft, and I could already picture the smell of cornbread in the air. "This is the one," I whispered. Rachel nodded. "It'll need work." I smiled. "So do we." We signed the lease 2 weeks later. Then came the hard part. We didn't have a design team or investors throwing around corporate buzzwords. It was just me, Rachel, and a crew of tired contractors who looked at us like we were crazy for caring about tile colors and reclaimed wood. We picked out every single thing. Mismatched chairs from flea markets, mason jar lighting, soft blue napkins that reminded me of my mother's dish towels. Rachel dealt with permits, licenses, health inspections. I tested recipes at night in Mitchell's borrowed kitchen, tweaking spice levels and jotting down notes in the same old composition notebook I used back when I lived with her. Hank came by once. He stood in the doorway of our half-finished kitchen, arms crossed, eyebrows raised. "You really doing this?" "Looks like it." He snorted. "You don't have a chef." I swallowed. "I know." He stared at me for a beat, then grumbled. "I'm too damn old to be sweating in someone else's startup." "But I'll help train whoever you hire," he interrupted. "Get them in shape. Just don't make me wear a name tag." I almost hugged him. Instead, I just nodded. "Thank you." Opening a restaurant is like planning a wedding and giving birth at the same time. There are a million things to do, and every single one feels urgent. Vendor contracts, food suppliers, staff schedules, tastings, inventory, budgeting. Some nights, I fell asleep on top of spreadsheets. Rachel would find me in the morning with coffee in one hand and a highlighter in the other, red ink all over my fingers. "You good?" she'd ask. No, I'd grown. "But I'm alive." We hired 2 cooks fresh out of culinary school. One pastry chef who had quit a Michelin restaurant because she hated the ego, and a server team of college students who showed up early and stayed late. None of us were experts, but we cared, and that counted. The menu came together slowly: biscuits with hot honey, sweet potato hash, braised pork shoulder, banana pudding with a ginger snap crust. Everything made from scratch. No shortcuts. No apologies. I remember standing in that kitchen the night before opening day, staring at the prep list, my hand shaking as I peeled the 100th russet potato. Rachel came up beside me and said, "You ready?" I turned to her, apron smeared with flour and eyes puffy from 3 hours of sleep. "No, but let's do it anyway." We opened on a rainy Saturday in October. The first customers came in with umbrellas and low expectations. But by noon we had a wait list. People lingered at their tables, sipped coffee slowly, asked about ingredients. They smiled. They laughed. They came back the next day. And the next. 1 week in, a local food blog wrote a glowing review. "No frills, no fuss. Just food that hugs you from the inside." I taped that article above the line in the kitchen. Every time service got crazy or a soufflé sank or someone forgot to restock the butter, I'd glance at it and remember we were doing something real. We weren't just feeding people. We were healing them, too. A month passed. Then, too. The farm table wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. By the end of our second month, we had regulars. People started calling ahead, asking for the corner table or the one near the window with the sun in the morning. We had families who came every Sunday after church, artists who ordered the same cornbread every Tuesday, and one sweet old man who left a handwritten note with every check. "This reminds me of my mother's kitchen," one said. "Don't change a thing. We had our hiccups, of course. A clogged sink, a missed delivery, a server who showed up drunk and had to be let go. But even through the chaos, there was this quiet, glowing truth. We had built something real." Mitchell came by often, not to micromanage, but to watch, to sit back with a cup of black coffee and a grin that told me he was proud. "This place has soul," he told me one night as I wiped down tables. "But it's also getting crowded." I looked around. Every seat was filled. People were waiting by the door. The kitchen was stretched thin, and our team was working double time just to keep up. Rachel joined us at the bar, flipping through that week's numbers. "He's right. We're turning people away most nights." "I know," I said, running a hand through my hair. "But it's a good problem, right?" Mitchell leaned in, voice low. "I think it's time you considered opening a second location." The words landed like a boulder in my chest. A second location. I hadn't even fully caught my breath from the first. Rachel's face said exactly what I was thinking. "Isn't that a little fast?" "Maybe," Mitchell replied, "but the window's open now. This isn't just a trend, Maggie. You've struck something deeper. People want what you're offering. And there's demand." I stared at the register, at the tables packed with strangers who now felt like family. Could we really do it again? Multiply the magic without losing the heart? Rachel said nothing, but I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. Later that night, we sat in the office, the door closed behind us. She was on the floor, back against the wall, spreadsheets in her lap. I was perched on a milk crate, heart racing. "I don't want to mess this up," I admitted. "You won't," she said softly, "but we can't do it the same way. It'll be bigger, more pressure. We'll need more staff, more systems, tighter controls." I nodded slowly. "Do you think we can pull it off?" She looked up at me, eyes steady. "I think you've come too far to play small." The next week, we started scouting. We looked at over a dozen spaces, some too modern, some too boxy, some with landlords who didn't get the vibe we were going for. Then we found it, an old restaurant on the edge of downtown, tucked between a record store and a plant shop. It had high ceilings, tons of light, and the faint smell of possibility in the air. It needed work, but I could already hear the clatter of pans, the hum of conversation, the scent of biscuits and gravy floating through the door. Rachel walked the perimeter, jotting down notes. Mitchell stood near the entrance, arms crossed, grinning. I walked to the middle of the space, turned in a slow circle, and whispered to myself, "We could make this home." And that was it. We signed the lease that Friday. While the paint was still peeling and the plaster was crumbling, we rolled up our sleeves and got to work again. Different location, Same mission. To serve food that tasted like it came from someone who loved you. It was a Thursday evening when it happened. The new place, Farm Table Downtown, had just opened 2 weeks earlier. We were still finding our rhythm. The host stand had a small wobble we hadn't fixed yet. The pastry fridge was still on back order. But the dining room? Full. Every table taken. Voices layered over jazz in the background. Kitchen humming. It felt alive. I was by the front, double-checking the reservation list when I heard that voice. Familiar. Too familiar. Seems a little noisy for a place this upscale, the man said with a smirk. I turned. There he was. Chase. And beside him, Brittany, dressed head to toe in designer labels that tried too hard. Her hair was perfect. Her smile fake. Her eyes scanning the room like it belonged to her. My stomach didn't drop. My hands didn't shake. I just stood still. They didn't recognize me. At least not right away. Brittany looked around, then smirked. This must be new. Cute in a rustic sort of way. Bet the waitresses wear flannel. Chase chuckled, his eyes flicking past me. Yeah, wouldn't be surprised if Maggie ended up somewhere like this. Assuming she didn't drown in that mess she ran from. I didn't flinch. Just as he turned toward me fully, a server passed by and said clearly, "Ms. Dawson, the supplier's here for the new seasonal tasting. He's waiting by the kitchen." Chase's face changed. It was slow, like molasses creeping across a mirror. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something sharp and hollow. "You're the owner?" I met his eyes. "That's right." Brittany blinked. "Wait, you run this place?" I smiled. "Built it. Twice." She scoffed. "Well, I guess Chase gave you a head start, with the money." My smile didn't fade. "You mean the loan you both tried to trick me into signing?" Brittany went pale. Chase's jaw locked. I leaned just slightly forward. "It's funny. I used to think you two ruined me. But turns out you gave me the push I needed." Neither of them spoke. Chase's mouth opened like he might say something, then closed again. I stepped back, gestured toward the door. "We're fully booked tonight. Maybe try somewhere else." And just like that, they turned and left. No screaming. No dramatics. Just silence. Sweet, satisfying silence. I stepped out onto the back patio once the rush had died down. The night was cool, the kind of Texas breeze that makes you forget just how hot the day was. The city lights twinkled in the distance. Inside, dishes clattered softly as the staff cleaned up. Laughter from the last lingering guests drifted through the open doors. Rachel joined me, handing me a steaming mug of tea. "You okay?" she asked. I didn't answer right away, just stared out over the fence, listening to the wind move through the oak trees. "They came in tonight," I said. She didn't have to ask who. "Chase." I nodded. "And Brittany." She let out a low whistle. "Let me guess, smug, loud, and condescending?" "More or less." She leaned against the railing beside me. "And how'd it feel?" I thought about that for a moment. About the way Chase's smirk had cracked. The way Brittany had blinked, caught in a lie that didn't work anymore. "I thought it would hurt," I admitted. "I thought I'd feel angry or vindicated. And I just felt done." Rachel smiled, soft and proud. "That's the best kind of victory." I sipped my tea and looked up at the stars. I said, "there was a time I would have given anything for him to want me again, just to prove I mattered." Rachel glanced over. "And now?" "Now I don't need that. I have this. My name on the window. My food on the plates. My people in this space. He didn't break me, he redirected me." She nudged my shoulder. "You finally believe it, don't you?" I nodded. "I do." The truth was, I wasn't the same woman who had walked into that cheap cafe months ago with calloused hands and a broken heart. I wasn't a shadow waiting to be chosen. I was the one doing the choosing now. Of my life. Of my future. of who got to stand beside me and who didn't. And Chase? He didn't even make the list. As the last light flickered off inside, I turned to Rachel. What's next? She grinned. Sleep, then brunch, then maybe a cookbook. I laughed. Let's survive Sunday service first. She raised her mug. To survival. I clinked mine against hers. To building something that lasts. And I meant it, because I finally understood. Success isn't a man in a suit handing you a life. Success is choosing your life, piece by piece, and building it from the ground up. Even if it starts with a suitcase, a broken heart, and a recipe written in pencil. This was mine.